KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Welcome to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, created and hosted by Scott Knudsen, to explore the crossroads of horses and business. Now here's your host, Scott Knudsen.
Hi, and welcome to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. I'm your host, Scott Knudsen. Whether you're listening to us on KCAA, the NBC affiliate out in California, or watching our podcast on one of our many platforms, we want to welcome you. Today, we have a super fun show for you. I know you're going to love the stories, and I can't wait for you to meet this man. David Carlew is on the show. He's the executive director and founder, along with Charlie Daniels, for the Journey Home Project, and also the president and founder, along with Charlie Daniels, for Blue Hat Records. David, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Scott. It's honored to be here. I was really excited when you hit me up on social media and asked me to be a part of it. I thought you maybe wanted me to come work it and maybe run some of the audio or something.
Man, I love following you, man. You got the coolest post, and I'm so glad I said your name right after the story. I don't know if you'd share it with the audience, but I had some pressure there.
Well, it's, Corlew is, it's to me, it seems so easy. It's Corlew, but people have called me so many different things. It just varies. But the great story is my dear friend. I love him. I've known him for over 30 years, is Roy Cooper, the world champion, maybe the greatest calf roping champion. Most will say that he's the greatest that has ever been. And Roy and I have been friends for years, but when we first met, he started calling me Corley. And for some reason, he can't get away. When he did know me, that's what he called me, was Corley. And so now he continues after 30 years to call me Corley, especially if he's had a drink or something. And but years ago, he was having a calf roping event at his place in Durant, and I went down and worked it and helped him with the livestock and stuff. And Charlie came and played, and he had me a money clip. I mean, a really nice, us cowboys, we have nice silver. Yeah. There's a lot of things we don't have. We don't have nice shirts or something, but we got good silver and leather. And I get this great money clip. He presents me this money clip, and it's beautiful. It's got a calf roper on it and gold inlaid, all of this. And I flip it over and it goes, David Corley. So, what? Kind of hurt my feelings. I thought he knew me. But now it's a treasured piece. Now I love it. I wouldn't change it he's tried to get it from me a couple of times to change it. And God, I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Oh, that's so awesome.
I like being David Corley. I'll be anything for Roy Cooper.
That's so great. That's so great. So where do you call home? Where you got a beautiful home there. Where do you call home?
Well, thank you. My home, I live in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, which is probably 25 miles east of Nashville. It's a community that Charlie lived in, and I've been here for, a little over 40 years now, I think. But I'm from Nashville. I grew up in downtown Nashville. I'm a city kid. I grew up in the city, and I'm a Nashville native. My family has been here in Tennessee literally since it was a state. There's a lot of things the Corlews did wrong, but one thing they did do is they kept good records. And so I kind of know where my family, I know how it goes back to, before they even came to the country. And we were talking about that. My name was a derivative of a French, a Corleu. But I do know where I come from. Sometimes that's not a good thing, but at least I know.
Absolutely. So growing up in the city in Nashville, did you want to go straight into music, or did you want to go the cowboy lifestyle? Because you have both.
No, I had, the funny thing about me, I grew up pretty rough in a lower middle class family. My dad worked for the L&N Railroad for almost 50 years, and he worked really hard. It wasn't nowadays, I think they make a lot of money. He certainly didn't. He was a brakeman and then became a conductor. But we grew up, it was 10 of us in a 2-bedroom house, pretty much downtown Nashville, rough neighborhood, rough times. And so as I ventured out into life, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I ended up, I was a fighter. I was a Golden Glove fighter. I started fighting, and it was a means to get me off the streets. Had a father, wasn't my father. My father was a great father, but he was working all the time. I had one of my friend's father invite me to come, and I think I was only 12 at the time, and they had what they call pee-wee boxing, and I went and started boxing, and that was the first thing that gave me the desire to want to get out and be something that I actually thought I could actually accomplish something. I had self-esteem problems as a kid, as a lot of kids do when they grow up tough. But that was the start. No, I never thought I would be in the music business at all. Not till I was in my early 20s is when I met Charlie. Charlie was my first really I had a production job, an assistant I was 20 years old. I worked for a year or so, but when I met Charlie was my introduction in the entertainment business, which really became the catalyst. It became the launch pad for me being able to pursue all the dreams I had sitting on Woodrow Avenue in Nashville. All of a sudden I had a friend that people knew, and it allowed him and I had the same interests. So it allowed us to pursue all the childhood dreams that both of us had, and rodeo was one, and cowboying was one, and the military was one. And so, man, that's why my friendship with Charlie is just so important in my life. It's the center point of my life. Actually, I've had to deal with that somewhat like the military. When you're a part of a team, you come out and you're a part of something bigger than you, and you're moving forward, and you're knocking down doors and doing good stuff, and then you wake up one morning and you're on the street as a civilian, and you're who you are. And that's ultimately, it's what God does. I've come full circle. Now that's what I do. I help veterans reintegrate and learn to become civilians, which is very difficult for a lot of them.
Well, I love that. I love your story, and I couldn't wait all week, to do this show. I know the Cowboy Entrepreneur people that watch our show and listen to it, they're going to love. This is why it's so important to do this, is to help the veterans, acclimate back. It's to tell your stories and where you came from and what you did. So going back to childhood, did you like boxing? I know it was a means out, but did you enjoy that?
Well, I did, but I've always said that I became a champion out of fear. And I think that, I think that's what keeps us alive sometimes, is that little bit of fear that we hold on to, whether it is boxing, or is it walking out on stage and singing or speaking or doing this, which I have a fear of. But it's that fear that keeps you honest. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps you sharp. And,
absolutely.
And so I had fear of boxing, but it works good and bad. The boxing worked for me, but what happened to me later on in life was that I realized the only way I got attention was to hurt someone. And that didn't work so well for me at one point.
Right.
But I like a little bit of fear. It gets that adrenaline up.
Yeah, absolutely. So you met Charlie Daniels in your 20s. So I guess he was starting out. So what led to the rodeo? Because I know you have a big rodeo and ranch cowboy history.
Well, what happened for me is obviously I'm no different than the millions of other kids that grew up on Saturday morning watching Roy Rogers, and I knew that I always liked the Cisco kids, so I was drawn to the silver and the vote bits and
Right.
spurs that those guys had. So I knew I was done for even then. But like all kids, I grew up like that, and it just happened to be that I had an older brother that, because of his wife, his marriage, they had horses, and so I think, from the time I was 13, 14 years old, 15 years old, I would go out, clean stalls. I was around horses a lot. So as I got older, and ultimately was able to get my own horses and cattle and stuff, that it became, again, it was one of those childhood dreams that I was able to fulfill. And that, again, it comes from being with Charlie and being in that place. So a kid can grow up loving horses and want to be a cowboy all his life, and he can go out and pretty dang easy get a job punching cattle if you want to work for the money they pay.
Right.
But for me to be able to go and do the things that are above and beyond what you would ever dream of, those were opportunities that came from being the entertainment business. Really opened the door for me to pursue those dreams.
That's so great. That's so great. Well, I saw a picture with you with Casey Tibbs, and then we talked about Roy Cooper, and now it's even the modern day rodeo guys. So what would you say, are they the same generationally, or have they changed over the years? Because you've known.
Yeah, I think your audience, you would agree, your audience would agree that the Cowboys, Casey used to say it. He would say that, when he was rodeoing and was coming up in the business, if they would hit a certain town, if they were in Fort Worth, obviously there was going to be some rank horses, some great bucking stock. But if they were at a rodeo in Des Moines, Iowa, they might have Farmer Brown's old bull or just some feeder calves or something. And so obviously that this generational change has happened in rodeo to where now we breed bulls to be mean, to be hard, to be tough, and horses. And so I think, and then obviously in Casey's age and his time period was ultimately detrimental. If you know anything about Casey's life, is that those were cowboys that literally have come from the ranch and came to town on Saturday and rodeo. That's where it happened. Now we have fine-tuned athletes that train and they're not necessarily off ranches. Most of them do have ranches, but now it's more of an athletic sport, I think. And I don't think you see as many of that direct connection of somebody coming off of a ranch and becoming rodeo champion. But of course the Wright brothers have changed it all. The Wright brothers are a great example that it still lives. That kids come off of a ranch out of Utah and they just completely dominate rodeo. By the old way.
Yeah, by the way. Isn't that funny? I'm so glad you said that. That's a true point right there. Absolutely.
And again, I love the title of your show.
Thank you.
Think about that, Cowboy Entrepreneur. It's almost like someone said about Marine one time. Some guy told me or a friend of mine, I was introducing him, and it was an Air Force guy to a Marine. And they said, well, what do you do? Marines always are taking shots at everybody. And the lady said, I'm in the Air Force. I did something. He had something smart to say. And he said, she asked him what he did. He said, I was in Marine intelligence. And she said, boy, that's a play on words. And so cowboy entrepreneurship is a little bit of a play on words. But when I look around and see some of the things, take a walk, through Elko, Nevada, and see some of the braiding and some of the bit making and spur making in Texas, and Cotton Elliott down in mid Texas, down there around the 4.6s.
Right.
Well, that's an artistic craft in itself. So the term cowboy entrepreneurship comes alive.
Yes,
in the greatest way.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you.
Scott will be right back with more.
Hi, I'm Scott Knudsen, host of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, heard on KCAA Fridays, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'd like to talk to you about something I'm very passionate about. Those that know me know I love my coffee. In the morning, afternoon, and even late in the evening, I enjoy a good cup of coffee almost any time of the day. Now, my team at the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show has been working for several months on creating and introducing our own brand of coffee. We wanted to make sure that we got it just right. We don't want to put our name on anything unless we're 100% certain that it's the best product available, and we've finally done it. We have created a wonderful line of coffees, 13 fantastic flavors offered in whole bean, ground, and K-Cups. Any way you like to brew your coffee. Now, each of our coffees carries our brand, the very same brand that we put on our horses, our trailers, and our chaps. So you know that this is a quality product. And we only use 100% Arabica beans, the very best beans available. Just listen to some of these wonderful blends and flavors. Jamaican Me Crazy, Honduran San Marcos, Chocolate Cherry Amaretto, Breakfast Blend, and my very favorite, Haley's Blend. A coffee so good, we named it after my daughter. You can order these coffees today by going online to javacowboy.com. That's javacowboy.com. And if you order today, you can get an extra 10% off your final purchase just by entering the promo code COWBOY on checkout. Remember, that's promo code COWBOY for an extra 10% off. Just go to javacowboy.com to order your coffee today.
So there was a cool picture of you and you were feeding elk off a sled. And I believe that was in Wyoming.
Right.
What can you just, people don't get to do that. Can you describe what that was like? And did they just say, go feed some elk?
It was a great mixture of the entertainment business. I had met a family that was in the entertainment business, and they had asked for some help, some professional help, and I said I'd love to try to help if I could. And so they had called me up. I didn't really know the people very well. They said, would you like to come out and let's talk business, come out to our place? I had no idea where they lived. I thought they lived in Nashville. And so we have a place in Jackson Hole. And I don't think they really knew what my background was too, because by then I had worked on quite a few ranches, and on the ride from the airport to their house, obviously a really nice ranch, and they were very wealthy. And they said, we got to feed cattle tomorrow. We're going to feed on a sled. And while we're going to do that, we're going to feed some elk, because all the migration trails are blocked by fences and stuff. And so they allocate hay every year for the elk. And so I kind of stayed quiet, and we got up that next morning. Of course, I was dressed and ready to go, and coffeeed up. And when I started helping them hitch their teams up, they go, what's this about? You know, I mean, they had hands that worked for their ranch. And so I got up early and went and had coffee with cowboys and just kind of fell in. So it was a treat, because I had never done it before. I've fed a lot of cattle before off the back of a truck or trailers and stuff, but never off a sled. And it really was cool. It was a great experience.
Great picture. I love how you live your life. You just say yes, and you just go do something, and then all of a sudden you have a story. And I think people are, once again, we go back to the fear factor. They're afraid to say yes, or I don't know, or I don't have time. And you just say yes, and you're feeding elk. I think that's a good lesson.
Well, thank you. It's been an interesting life. I've had a different life. And I'm thankful for that. All comes from God.
Right.
And it's been good times, bad times, hard times. But what I believe now, even through the death of Charlie, that all of that was to prepare me for what I'm doing now, and that's to work with veterans.
Absolutely.
I needed all of that in order to really kind of finish out my life. And I think that's what I'll be doing. I hope I can continue to keep some cattle. I have a place and I have cattle, but I always think of it more as a treatment center than it is. It helps my sanity.
Yes, absolutely.
We can get as fancy as we want with our billfolds, so to speak, but doing the cowboy deal working as a hand, and it really kind of takes you down to that. It takes you down to your bark, the level of who you are.
Yeah, I love that. Takes you to your bark. I mean, it's so earthy, when you're out there, and it's just nothing better. I love the bunkhouse picture. You were comparing it to Yellowstone, and that picture of you in the bunkhouse. So
I want to say before we get started, the one disclaimer we should have put across is I've got dogs. I rescue dogs. So there's somebody coming up to the ranch right now, and so there's a lot of dogs barking. I hope it doesn't.
Hey, that's okay. You know what ranch doesn't have some? That's perfect. That's perfect. So could you describe a bunkhouse for people maybe that's listening to us on the radio on KCAA or watching our podcast? Maybe has never been in a bunkhouse. Maybe they saw Yellowstone, but that picture you put up of this is a bunkhouse. I thought it was so great.
Yeah. When I posted that, and I wanted everybody to know, I tried to put it in a way that I think Yellowstone's a great deal. The Yellowstone has brought awareness to the cowboy life and ranching in a certain way that would have never happened. And, it's like that. We wait for that great military movie, that Lone Survivor, or, Chris Kyle movie. We want those movies to come out to bring awareness to the things that we love and the people we love. And that's what Yellowstone has done. What I found, because the first time I went, I had been in some bunkhouses that were okay, but the first time I went to northern Nevada in the Ruby Mountains, I went with Kurt Marcus that we talked about, who has become a really, really world-renowned photographer. But he started out, his love was shooting cowboys. And I had met Kurt. Kurt had called me up, wanted to meet Charlie. And so, I traded him off. I'll introduce you to Charlie, but I want to go to one of those 1 million acre plus outfits, and we went to the YP, which was owned by the P-TAN Corporation north of Elko, and the YP, the IL, and the Spanish Ranch, among others. But there's 3 main ranches in the Ruby Mountains there that make up almost 7 million acres. Obviously, most of it BLM land. But I'd been to West Texas. I'd been to Arizona and worked on some outfits. But when I showed up at the YP, it was Easter. It was snowing like God Almighty, and we got there late. We'd been a long drive up from Colorado Springs, and when I got there, that bunkhouse, it was just concrete walls. It was almost like a jailhouse. It was built. The YP is a very, very old ranch. Casey Tibbs told me one time, I found Casey Tibbs's brother's name carved in the bunkhouse in the saddle room.
So cool.
On the wall.
So
his nickname was Short Long, because Casey's brother was a little guy. But anyway, old, and it was built, to house. It had tenant rooms, so your room was nothing but concrete floor, brick walls, concrete block walls, and bed springs. Obviously, you had your bedroll. You rolled your bedroll out on the bed springs. Some of the guys that had been there long enough had actually bought them a bed frame, or at least had a mattress, that they laid their bedroll on. But, it was cold. Took a long time for the water to heat up. You get 8 or 10 buckaroos taking a shower. That didn't happen very often, but when they did, we all did it together. I mean, in the sense that we were headed somewhere. And so it was cold. It was actually, I talked to my wife, and my wife said, "How is it?" And I said, "You wouldn't, it's different." But when I saw the bunkhouse on Yellowstone, they have a pool table and I think a foosball table, and they got a fireplace and a kitchen area and stuff. And that was just funny for me, because it was a really, but I'm sure there are bunkhouses that are nice like that. And God bless them for building something nice.
Absolutely.
They abuse cowboys enough. At least they can do is build them a nice place to lay down.
Absolutely. Get some rest.
So I cheer them on.
Yeah. So eight buckaroos in it, getting ready to go somewhere. It had to be fun though. Do you look back and say that was fun, even though it was miserable? Because that's kind of cowboying.
Oh, that's our greatest misery. I mean, that's our greatest memories.
Yes, absolutely.
They sound great now when I'm telling them now, you were miserable when it was happening, but they sound wonderful now when we're talking, to thousands of people out there. Yeah, a lot of that is, I mean, there's been days when I didn't want to be where I was at. I didn't want to do the work. I thought, what am I doing for, $45 a day? And I did all this. I was in the entertainment business, but I wasn't getting rich in the 70s. I certainly wasn't getting rich off working for Charlie. And so I did this. I didn't do it for the money, but I did it for the experience. But you question yourself sometimes, why am I not at home being a music business person? And but it was, again, because I love that, and again, it goes back to that misery factor. I grew up that way. Life was hard, and so even from that point in the 70s and 80s, I realized that every day wasn't going to be easy. Every day was hard, but if I got through it, it built a good memory, and it also built and it's good times. It's good times.
It is. We were out roping bulls the other day, and the wind was like 50 miles an hour. It was cold. The cows were itchy. Everything was itchy. They were nervous. I can't remember if it was my brother or my nephew, and they were like, "This is going to be a good memory one day, but maybe not right now." And it's the truth. It's the absolute truth. You look back as a sense of accomplishment.
That was a great photograph of you faced off with that bull.
Thank you so much.
That you posted. I love that. It was kind of the showdown.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. Yeah, he was trying to get to that other bull that had roped, and he was coming after him. So my horse put us in a good position for sure.
That's a good deal.
Yeah. You said something the other day when we were talking, and I love this. You said when you're with Charlie Daniels, you get to see things and go places that regular people don't get to do. You just have so many stories. And would you mind just sharing a few? And I love the picture with Muhammad Ali, or going out to eat dinner with Louis L'Amour, and just this incredible, rich life that you've had.
Well, the Muhammad Ali, you asked me about that before, obviously with my past in boxing.
Yeah, now I understand.
In early 80s, I don't remember the date, but it was in the early 80s. But anyway, they had hired Charlie to perform at an Olympic celebration party, and it was when the Olympics were in New York. And God, I've gone blank. But anyway, we went to this party. It was a party to salute the Olympians, and obviously, being a boxer, Joe Frazier was there, Leon Spinks was there, and then Muhammad Ali was there, Floyd Patterson was there.
The greats.
But I gotta say, being a fighter, I saw Muhammad Ali, and he was one of those people that I didn't know even how to approach him. But what I was excited about was Dorothy Hamill. And I posted that probably before you started following me. But I saw Dorothy Hamill, and she was just, the goddess of the Olympics that year, or quite a few years. And so I went and introduced myself to Dorothy Hamill. My wife is the one that grabbed me from that conversation and took me over, and we saw Muhammad Ali, and obviously he had already started having issues with his issues, and so my wife said she first said, "Can he have a picture with you?" And he looked at me, you know how he would look and bear down on people, and I thought, oh God, what have I done? And then he said he was a fighter, and so he reached down and grabbed my hand and put it on his chin, and he put his hands up. So that's how that photograph came
so cool
together. Yeah. And so it's, and that's something I had, and I hadn't even seen it in a long time. And a couple of months ago, I dug it up, and I thought, wow, I'm going to post this. you know, he's
really
such
cool.
an incredible, you know, obviously there's a lot of mixed feelings about him and
Right.
the road he took regarding the military and the Vietnam War and all, but he did a lot of good. He did a lot of good in fighting his cause.
Right.
You know, he did a lot for kids on the street, you know, and obviously I'm partial to that because had it not been for my boxing coach, had it not been for Charlie Daniels, I would probably not be alive. Probably wouldn't have made it through my journey on the streets. And so I'm drawn to that. And he was one of those guys. He was one of those
Wow.
guys.
So cool. So cool. Well, let's talk about eating dinner with Louis L'Amour, because I love Louis L'Amour, and I have his book right there, Education of a Wandering Man. And I think that's such a cool biography. It's a Western within his life.
Yeah. He was a really interesting guy. I mean, he did a lot of things before he kind of entered in the Wild West, so to speak. I think he was there's a lot to Louis that has never been written about, in the sense that I think he was somewhat of a kind of Indiana Jones mercenary kind of guy.
That's absolutely
China, all over the Soviet Union. He had a life prior to him being famous with Western novels. But again, Charlie and I, Charlie had done a record, and I had read a Louis L'Amour book in high school, and I turned Charlie on to it one day. We were on the bus, and you know, that's all we did was ride on the bus and read. And I turned him on. We both fell in love and got to follow, reading every book. Every truck stop had Louis L'Amour books in it. So, so he named Louis had a book called High Lonesome, and Charlie, on his early on, Charlie bought a little Winnebago when he made some of his first money, and he jumped in that thing and took off out west just to take some time off with his wife. And he wrote this song while he was in the mountains. I think he was actually in the mountains of Colorado, but he wrote a song called High Lonesome, which was the name of one of Louis' books. So Charlie wanted to name and this is in the 70s also. And so we wanted to name our album High Lonesome, but we had to have permission. And we called Bantam Books, and they said, we have to get Mr. L'Amour's his permission. And so they gave us a number, and Charlie and I were like kids. We were at Charlie's house, and we're sitting around, and so we're going to call this number. And we were thinking we were going to get a marketing person or his assistant or somebody. And I'm on the phone, and so Charlie goes, "You asked for him. Or see if he's there and tell him what we want." I said, "Okay." So I call, and as soon as he picks up the phone, I realize it's Louis L'Amour.
Oh, goodness.
And yeah, he goes, "Hello," you know, this distinguished voice. And I'm going like, holy crap, it's him. And I can't say anything. I go, "Mr. L'Amour?" He goes, "Yes." That's me. And it's silence, crickets. And I go, "Here, Charlie." So I just handed the phone to Charlie. And Charlie started talking to him, and we decided we were going to play the LA Forum with Willie Nelson, and we invited him to come to a concert, and he came, and we actually had dinner prior to the concert, and so that was fun. And then the next time we went back, we actually met him at the Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and that was cool because you got me and Charlie we've got 20-inch stovepipe boots on and our hats and our Stampede strings, and here we go walking in. At first, the doorman didn't want to let us in the hotel. Then we told him we were meeting Louis L'Amour, and so he has his own table at the Polo Lounge, and so that was fun. But what we talked about was we went to his house after Charlie and Louis had become really good friends. We went to his house one evening, and he did live in, you wanted to think Louis lived out in the mountains and or the deserts or where he wrote about, but he actually had a home in Los Angeles, but it was beautiful. It was southwestern, and his study was unbelievable. I mean, the research books that he had were were phenomenal. A side note was he said that when Steve McQueen was doing the movie Tom Horn, I don't know if you're familiar with who Tom Horn was.
Yes.
When Steve McQueen was doing his study for that, he asked Louis if he could borrow some books, and Louis never loaned anybody a book. He said, "You can come to my house and read all day long, but you're not leaving with that book because I'll never get it back." And so Steve McQueen literally spent a week literally sleeping on his couch in his study and literally getting into character in Louis' study to prepare for the Tom Horn movie. And but that night we ended up having dinner with Louis, and and I can obviously, I'm a little bit of a romanticist, but it was candlelight. Obviously they had, but it was simple. It was just Charlie, myself, Louis, and Richard Crenna, who was a really famous character actor. He started out on The Real McCoys. For any listeners, would be
absolutely.
But he ended up doing the Rambo movies. He was Rambo's commander, and so Richard had done some Louis L'Amour movies and did some narratives for him when the audiobooks first came out. So, man, just to be able to sit at the table and ask Louis L'Amour any question you wanted to ask about the West, and he was so brilliant and had done so much research in Western culture and lifestyle that when he talked about a place, actually he had still, his wife Kathy still has a home in Durango. Louis talked Charlie into buying a piece of property in Durango. So for years, Charlie went out every Christmas and spent Christmas with Louis and his family. And but Louis bought a place that he actually found researching one of his books, and bought the ranch. It was a couple of 100 years old in Colorado and had all this great history to it. But
wow.
Of course, Louis L'Amour would have that house. So
yes, yeah, it just fits.
He was a gentleman. He was brilliant. He was a boxer. He was a prize fighter. He fought in the state fairs and things like that to pick up extra money. But what a wonderful guy. I have a collection of books that he signed, and I can literally lay them out to how he signed them it was just an acquaintance until we got to be good friends over the years, along with Charlie. And amazing. So it's something I cherish a lot. It was great.
I love that.
All of that fed my love for the West. It continued to just, you know the deal. You get up every morning. So you get up in the morning, you go out, you face off with a 2,000-pound bull.
It's a good day.
Louis L'Amour said that big country does one of two things to people. It either inspires people or it scares the hell out of them. And there's people that don't. You go out and look across the Continental Divide or Medicine Bowl or something, and people go, "I don't want no part of that place." But for you and I, we're inspired by it.
Yeah.
We want to throw a saddle on a horse and trot it right across the middle of it.
I'd love to. Oh, that'd be so much. Oh, it'd be wonderful. It'd be wonderful. I get excited talking about it. I love that.
Pull one of those halters. Pull one of those bridles down there.
Man,
let's go.
I'm telling you, I could, man. We'd put them out. We'd be off. For sure.
Thank you for listening to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. Scott will be right back with more. For more information on Scott Knudsen, the Cowboy Entrepreneur, visit us online at cowboyentrepreneur.com.
For sure. So let's talk movies. So Jesse James movie, you were in a movie with Johnny Cash, Chris Christopherson. I saw the picture. I loved it. Did you want to be an actor? Or is that just, I'm going to get in a movie now? I've done so many other things.
No, it really came from, again, during those early days in the 70s and early 80s when our payroll wasn't the thickest payroll in the country. And again, trying to find all things horseback. It's one thing to have your head in out west, but you live in Tennessee. So we don't have big country, and there's not the opportunities that you have in Texas or people have in Nevada or Idaho, wherever they're at, New Mexico. And so I was always looking for things, Western things to do. So because I had worked gosh, it's such a complicated thing. The union that works all the films and all the movies is the IATSE. It's the stagehands union, and they do lighting and they do sound and they build props and they do all that. So when you see that 5 or 6 pointed seal that comes up at the end of every movie,
right,
that's the IATSE seal. It means that there's a union film. And so in the music business, I had worked for the IATSE. So they work close with the Teamsters. The Teamsters, obviously from the name, comes from Teamsters that used to drive wagons. I mean, that were freight haulers back in the old days with mule teams. Well, the Teamsters now represent truck drivers and that sort of thing. Well, oddly enough, the Teamsters, the category of wranglers, and in some state, that the Teamsters do that job. So when there's vehicles, when there's horses, that falls under the Teamster union. And so I had some Teamster buddies and they called me and they said, we need some horses for this film. And are you willing to do it? And so I said, of course, so I go out and they're shooting that film here in Nashville. And they shot it in a lot of the small towns around Nashville. Some of the little towns, I'm sure Texas is full of them, that have the square, like Fort Worth. You got the courthouse in the middle, right, and then all the little buildings. So, we did it in about 5 or 6 different little towns. They filled the streets full of dirt, hauled dirt in, made the streets, cool. And my first job, I was there for a couple of weeks. First job was just chasing down. I think I posted that. Me and my buddy, our job was to chase down the horses that these actors would fall off of or get bucked off of when they'd start the gunfight scenes, robbing banks and stuff. They had these sound effects where they just shoot off sounds, gun sounds, firearm sounds, and so ultimately somebody'd either get bucked off or a horse would pull away from a place where they were tied up, and we chased them down, and that meant leaving the dirt and chasing a bronc right down Main Street in Springfield, Tennessee, trying to build a loop and jump a park bench at the same time. So that was kind of my first job. And then ultimately when they had parts where you could, once they see your face one time, that kind of kills you for extra parts, so I was in a lot of scenes, but ultimately I got one part where I think we were burying one of the James family, and I was in the shot with Johnny Cash. So I got my walking papers the next day. I was in one shot and out I went.
Out you go.
I did that. I worked on a lot of music videos here in Nashville. I had the opportunity to work with Amy Grant when she had first began, and one of her videos required horses and someone to work with her. I think she had ridden quite a bit before, but not a bad job to get to spend a couple of days with Amy Grant and try around on horses. And yeah, it was good work if you could get it. And I got it. But that was again, everything we'll talk about today all spawns from the entertainment business. It gave me that opportunity. It's kind of like a coloring book, it's like seeing something and going, wow, I want to do that. I want to be a part of that.
So cool, man. So let's talk Charlie Daniels. So what was he like? I mean, as far as just being he just seemed like just such a good man. He was true to the Western line.
Yeah, Charlie was, and I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, it's fine.
Charlie was just one of those guys that you meet in a lifetime. He grew up tough. He grew up, and his father was a timberman. His father bought timber for the big timber companies along the Carolina coast, Georgian Carolina coast. So that involved traveling. So he traveled a lot. He told me, and this might not be the right number, but I think in one year he went to 3 or 4 different schools in one school year, and he was overweight. He got picked on. He was overweight. He wore thick glasses, and so a little bit parallel with me in the sense of growing up rough and and maybe not having that great life. That, of course, we look back on our childhood and we go, wow, it's a great childhood. But he grew up tough. He got picked on because of his weight, his eyesight and stuff. And so that built the center of the core of who Charlie was. And so when Charlie showed up in Nashville trying to get in the music business, he didn't fit the mold.
Right.
But when Bob Dylan utilized him on a record on Nashville Skyline, obviously he was popular then.
Yeah.
And but he always fought that, because he said, you didn't like me when you didn't like me without Bob Dylan. Absolutely. And so there was a little bit of a chip that he carried on his shoulder for Nashville for a while. But a wonderful guy, grew up, spent a lot of time with his cousins, and he had a big family, cousin-wise and uncle-wise. And so a lot of his songs, Woolly Swamp and Long-Haired Country Boy, all those songs come from that growing up in rural North Carolina. I mean, think about it. I mean, obviously we went to Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, Bosnia, and all of that. But here's a guy that literally, when we did an event or when we met with veterans, here's a guy that remembered Pearl Harbor. He was listening to the radio with his grandpa when they attacked Pearl Harbor. He was 6 years old, 7 years old. Wow. And so here's a guy that had known all the wars from World War II forward. So it gave him, and he always said he had such a great appreciation for how the country were bound together during World War II. People were saving rubber and saving metal, and it was a community thing. I mean, we were a country then, right? And everybody was at war. We weren't at the mall while our veterans were out. I mean, our soldiers were fighting the war. Everybody was a part of it. I mean, my dad didn't fight, but my dad hauled a lot of military equipment and a lot of things. Everybody was a part of the war. Yeah. And so that became the center of who Charlie was. He was, a country boy. I mean, he deer hunted, bear hunted, coon hunted with dogs. He grew up in that kind of family. He said his uncle had 41 dogs at one time that they used. But he had that basis of being just what America stood for at that time, and always kind. Always told the story that somebody came up after he got pretty popular, and it was a poignant time for me. But somebody offered to pick up his check at a restaurant, and he said, "I'd rather you pick up somebody's check that can't afford it. I can afford my meal. Grab somebody that is having a little tougher time than me." And that really was kind of a center point of who Charlie was. That's a great story. He was a father to me. I had a great father. I loved my dad, but he was my father. He was a brother. He was a boss. I learned that definitive line that he was my friend, but he was my boss, which was a great boundary to learn. Mm-hmm. And then we had the same interests. So because he loved Louis L'Amour, I got to meet Louis L'Amour. Because he loved rodeo, I got to go to the national finals. And so trust me, when I met Roy Cooper, Roy wasn't coming to meet me. He was coming to meet Charlie. So I just hung on and got the fringe benefits. Yeah. I tried to pursue everything that we did that I liked, and I would go a step further and pursue it. But man, we had a good run. We were buddies, and we worked 47 years we were together. Wow. What a great relationship. And how blessed to get to do that. How many people don't get that opportunity, not just to go have that status around the world, but just to have a friend for that long that means that much. So that's awesome. And I think his music, it's just going to live on and on. I hear the newer people singing some of his songs, and I think his memory is just going to keep going, don't you? Yeah, I do. I mean, he was best known for being a part of the Southern rock movement. Mm-hmm. And even with that, obviously when we first started out, we toured with the Allman Brothers and Skinner, and him and Ronnie Van Zant were best friends. but Skinner, Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker Band, and Charlie always thought it was more of a lifestyle rather than a genre of music. It was a mixture of blues that was played in the South and jazz, and then the country, what was called country and Western music back then. And so we were products of a generation of lower middle class kids that grew up in the South. And so we were inundated with blues and inundated with country music, and so that became what some people call a genre of music. It was a lifestyle for us. It was just young country boys that, and so that was, I think he was noted for. He never wanted to take more credit than he felt was due. Obviously, the Allman Brothers were a big influence, not only on his music, but his just kind of the way we came up in the business. Awesome. And, lots of memories.
Yeah, lots of memories. That's awesome. I want so that picture behind you, that's really cool. There's that series of 3 pictures.
Yeah.
It looks like skin.
Yeah, it's a pen and ink. It's I love art. I love Western art. I'm a huge, Charlie Russell is my Zen father. I love the Charlie Russell paintings.
Beautiful
I've
work.
made quite a few trips to Great Falls. I have all his books and things. But that was actually along the way. Another wonderful human being that I got to meet was Buck Taylor. And Buck Taylor was newly in Gunsmoke, and then he went on, he did 1 million Western films. His dad, Dub Taylor, was famous and did all the John Wayne movies and things. But Buck and I have become friends over the years, and Buck, I bought that when Buck first started painting and drawing. I'm sure he did it a lot, but when he became famous, Buck did that piece. It was a piece that he did right after they finished Tombstone, which Buck was Turkey Creek Johnson in Tombstone. And then his 2 sons, Adam, and I'm trying to remember the other son's name, but they all worked on Tombstone together. So each one of those pictures is a sketch. One is Buck, one is Adam, and one is the other son. And and then soon after that, Adam passed away. He was killed in a motorcycle wreck. Mm. And so I cherish that. I mean, I cherish it, one, because Buck did it. I love Buck because he's darn sure a cowboy first. I mean, Buck's got a few years and miles on him. And I mean, I talked to Buck last week. He's still roping. I mean,
oh my goodness, that's awesome.
I think Buck's in his 80s, and he's still roping and still training his horses. And I just love him to death. We've become good friends. I've got some other Buck Taylor pieces around here, and he's donated some art for us to auction off for our foundation. So again, part of that era, he was a friend of Casey's. I think that I met a lot of those old guys because of Casey Tibbs, again, through show business. Casey showed up at a concert in San Diego, California, too many years to remember, maybe 1980, 79, 80. And got to be really, really good friends with Casey. And I was friends with Casey during his tough times with alcohol. And we became really, really good friends. And then right before, when he got sick, he got cancer. And Mike Warner, who was running the Hall of Fame, the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs, asked me and Charlie, would you guys do a concert? We want to build a statue of Casey. And it's the statue that's in front of the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame that Ed Hayes, who is on social media that I see a lot. Ed was going to do the sculpture. So if any of those that are listening have ever been to the Hall of Fame, it's a 28-foot bronze of Casey riding a horse called Necktie. And I understand from Paul Bear, who ran Capriola saddles for years up in Elko. He said that horse had been turned out 125 times and had never been ridden. And Casey rode him. And as Paul Bear said, he ripped the feathers out of him. And that was when I've got a bronze. I've got one of the first cast off the big bronze.
Oh my.
But we helped raise that money, and we got the statue up in August of '88. And then Casey, I've actually got a picture over here with me and Casey sitting under the bronze, but then he passed away that following January in '89.
Oh my goodness.
But what a great legend of rodeo, and that brought, I mean, he was the Muhammad Ali of rodeo. I mean, he wore satin shirts and purple shirts, and people called him names and stuff for being too flamboyant. But he was a wonderful guy, and I don't think anybody will argue there's never been anybody to ride a bucket horse like Casey Tibbs.
No.
There's a brilliant documentary about Casey called The Floating Horses. And if you want to know about Casey Tibbs, you should see that. It's a brilliant film, brilliant documentary.
Wonderful. Man, that's a beautiful story too. I'm glad you got the statue up so he could enjoy it. That's so cool. I can't believe our time's almost over. It's going so fast. I definitely want to talk about the Journey Home project though. That's just so special. Would you mind just talking about it, how people can find it, donate it, donate to it?
It's the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project.org. You can really Google Charlie, but it's the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project.org. We're on all social media. It's a foundation that we started. We raised a lot of money over the years. We played an enormous amount of bases during the Cold War in Europe. And then when they knocked the trade towers down, Charlie wanted to be one of the first guys downrange in Iraq. So that started yet another journey in my life as well as Charlie's. But we raised money for a lot of other foundations, and we realized that there were a few foundations that hit bumps in the road. We decided that if we were going to raise money in Charlie's name, then and be good stewards of the money, that we'd start our own foundation. So we did. It's 10 years old. We're probably getting really close to $2 million total money raised over the years. But Charlie always said it's not your money, so you give it away as soon as you raise it. So it's not like we have a lot of money in the bank, but I think we've made some difference in some veterans' lives since we did this. Now that Charlie has passed, Chris Young, the country artist, has stepped in. I had actually met him on a trip to Iraq on another job. I was working in Iraq, but Chris has jumped in and has done 2 events. We're going to do 2 more events with Chris this year. And it gives us the opportunity our mission statement is to support the return, the rehabilitation, and the reintegration back into civilian life, which we've kind of come, it's coming back. And as I said earlier, that's what's happened to me. I got to hang around with a rock star for 47 years. And on July the 6th, a year and a half ago, I woke up and I was just a civilian again.
Right.
And so been a transition period, but it's I learned a lot from Charlie that's going to get me through the rest of what life I have left, what's left of me.
Oh, come on now. You got a long time. Oh, my goodness. They're roping at 80 and 85. We can do it.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, man, thank you so much for being on our show today. I had so much fun. The time flew. I mean, we could talk for hours, but I really had a great time. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Well, let's find us a rough old bunkhouse together, and we'll get together and have some fun and exchange some stories. But Scott, I really appreciate it. It was an honor to meet you, and I appreciate what you're doing. Obviously, I love bringing attention to the Cowboy way. It's the life.
Absolutely.
Like no other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show.
All right. God bless. Take care.
God bless.
Thank you to all the great sponsors of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. If you or your business is interested in being a sponsor of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, please call our office at 830-992-1786 or visit our website, cowboyentrepreneur.com.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM.